The air in the room felt heavier than the black dress clinging to my shoulders. Even the chandelier seemed to hum in silence, as though it too knew this day wasn't meant for light. My husband's portrait hung above the mantel, the same calm eyes, the same faint smile, only this time, it felt like he was watching the chaos he left behind. When I walked in, the conversation stopped. My son's laughter, which had filled the room moments ago, froze mid-sentence. His wife looked away, pretending to fix her hair. I could almost hear the sound of their thoughts. She's still here. The lawyer cleared his throat, his voice echoing off the marble walls. We'll begin the reading of Mr. Collins' will. I sat quietly, my hands folded on my lap, still smelling faintly of the roses from his funeral bouquet. Then came my son's voice, sharp and dripping with disbelief. She's still breathing? He said, leaning back in his chair. Thought she'd be gone by now. Maybe we should check her pulse before we start. A few snickers rippled through the room. No one met my eyes. I'd raised him, the boy who used to run to me after falling off his bicycle, crying for my comfort. Now he was a man I could barely recognize, speaking as if my existence was an inconvenience. The lawyer continued, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Collins has left detailed instructions. My son smirked, crossing his arms as if he already knew the outcome. He had always believed the world revolved around him, and his father had fed that illusion with every new car, every check, every undeserved praise. When the lawyer mentioned my name, I saw his smirk fade, just slightly. It was the first crack in his confidence. To my beloved wife, Margaret, the lawyer read, I leave the property known as the Willow Estate, and a controlling share of the family holdings. The silence that followed was deafening. My son's jaw tightened. His knuckles turned white around the armrest. That can't be right, he muttered, his voice trembling with anger. His wife touched his arm. Maybe it's just temporary, she whispered. But I heard it all, every word, every drop of greed hidden behind their polite faces. I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because the truth was, I hadn't come here to defend what was mine. I had come to watch their faces. When they realized I wasn't the helpless old woman they'd written off long ago. And as the lawyer read the next line, I finally understood what my late husband had meant when he'd said, they'll only see your worth when you stop trying to prove it. The moment the lawyer's words left his mouth, the room fractured. My son shot up from his chair, his voice cracking through the air. Excuse me? You're saying my mother gets controlling shares? That's absurd. My father knew I was supposed to run the company. The lawyer didn't flinch. I can only read what was written. Mr. Collins, these were your father's final instructions. For a second, I thought he might throw the crystal glass in his hand. Instead, he clenched it until his knuckles turned ghost white. His wife leaned close, whispering something only he could hear. But her eyes were fixed on me, calculating, cold. I'd seen that look before, ambition wrapped in silk. I sat quietly, folding my fingers tighter in my lap. My heart wasn't racing. It had done that years ago, back when the betrayal first began. I remembered the whispers behind closed doors, the nights my husband stayed late at the office, and the way my son slowly began to mimic his tone, that same sharpness, that same dismissive sigh when I spoke. The house had grown colder long before my husband's death. My son, the child I'd carried through sleepless nights, whose fever I'd prayed over, now looked at me as though I was a stranger trespassing in his future. Dad never trusted her with money, he said bitterly. She barely understands the business. This must be a mistake. I almost smiled, because if only he knew, I was the one who had helped his father build it. Every contract reviewed, every investor reassured when things went south. I was the silent partner behind every success. But of course, no one remembers the quiet ones when the applause starts. The lawyer cleared his throat again, continuing. Mr. Collins' instructions also include that all financial transitions be overseen by Mrs. Collins personally for the next 6 months. That did it. My son slammed his hand on the table. You can't be serious. She's too old to handle that. Too old. The words stung, but not because they were cruel, because they were familiar. He'd said the same thing the day he cut me off from the company years ago. Mom, you've done enough, he'd said then. Let me handle it from here. And I had let him. Because sometimes love makes you blind to the storm it's sheltering. Now, standing there, watching him unravel at the mere thought of losing control, I realized something simple yet sharp. He wasn't angry because I had power. He was angry because he'd spent years believing I never would again. As the lawyer gathered the papers, my son stormed toward the door, his voice echoing behind him. "She's not keeping it. I'll find a way to fix this. You'll see." The door slammed, rattling the chandelier. I exhaled slowly, letting the quiet fill the space he left behind. The roses from my husband's funeral still lay on the table, petals browning at the edges, beautiful once, fading now, much like the love that had once held this family together. But the story wasn't over yet, because my husband had left more than a will. He'd left a truth buried beneath it, and soon that truth would rise. The next morning, the house felt eerily still. Sunlight crept through the curtains, catching dust in its beams, tiny particles dancing like forgotten memories. I sat by the old mahogany desk, the one my husband used every night, and ran my hand over its surface. It still smelled faintly of tobacco and cedar. When I pulled open the drawer, I didn't expect to find anything new. I'd already gone through his things after the funeral, or so I thought. But beneath a stack of yellowed letters, I found a small brown envelope sealed with wax. My name was written across it in his handwriting. For a moment, I couldn't move. It felt like he was still speaking to me, through ink and paper, even from beyond the grave. I broke the seal with trembling hands and unfolded the letter. "If you're reading this, Margaret, it means they've already begun to fight over what they think I've left them. But what I've left you isn't just money. It's the truth. Our son may believe he earned everything on his own, but you and I know how much was sacrificed to build what we had. You kept the family from falling apart when greed crept in through the cracks. You were the spine that held everything upright. I need you to protect what's left, not the company, the legacy." I could almost hear his voice, calm, deliberate, full of the weight of unspoken regret. "You'll find the second key in the garden, under the old oak tree where you used to read. Use it when the time is right. And my dear, don't let them destroy each other. Not yet." Tears blurred the ink as I set the letter down. The garden, the old oak tree. I went outside, the morning chill biting through my sleeves. The earth beneath the oak was soft from last night's rain. I knelt, digging with my bare hands until I hit a small metal box. Inside it, a key, a folded paper, and a single photograph. The photograph was old me, my husband, and our son when he was 5. He was sitting on his father's shoulders, his laughter frozen in sunlight. On the back, in my husband's handwriting, were just 4 words. "Remember who we were." The folded paper, though, was something else entirely. A bank statement, and a document transferring ownership of a separate account. My name was listed as the sole beneficiary. The balance made my breath catch. He hadn't just left me shares. He had left me everything. For years, I'd let them make me small, quiet, invisible. But my husband, in his final act, had restored what they'd taken from me: dignity, control, and the power to decide what happens next. I stood up, brushing the dirt from my hands, looking toward the house where my son and his wife were still asleep, unaware that their story had just changed. They thought the will reading was the end. They were wrong. It was only the beginning. By evening, the calm I'd felt that morning was gone. The house, once so full of silence, now echoed with footsteps, whispers, and doors slamming. My son had returned, and he wasn't alone. His wife followed close behind, her heels clicking like warning shots on the marble floor. "Mother," he said, his voice tight but polite. The kind of politeness that always precedes cruelty. "We need to talk." I placed my teacup down carefully. "Of course." "About the will, I assume?" He didn't answer, not directly. He began pacing instead, his agitation barely contained. I spoke to the lawyer. "There's no way Father would have given you majority control unless—" He stopped, glaring at me. "Unless you manipulated him." I almost laughed. Manipulated him? The man who'd spent his final years defending our marriage to everyone but his own son? The man who'd trusted me when everyone else turned away? "I didn't manipulate your father," I said quietly. "He made his own choices." His wife stepped forward, her tone cutting. "Then prove it. Sign over the shares. We both know you don't need all that money. You're comfortable enough." Comfortable. The word dripped with arrogance, the kind born from never knowing hunger, or sacrifice, or the cost of love. "I'm afraid that's not possible," I replied. Her smile froze. "Excuse me?" I said, I continued, standing now, my voice steady, "that your father trusted me with what he built, and I intend to honor that trust." My son's face darkened. "This isn't about trust, Mother. It's about fairness. You've had your time, now it's mine. He sounded just like his father once had, back when ambition blinded him. And just like then, I felt the same, watching the people you love become strangers in pursuit of power. I took a slow breath. Fairness? I asked softly. Do you remember when your father was sick? And I stayed by his side while you were on vacation in Monaco? When the doctors said he might not make it through the night? Where were you then? He flinched, just slightly. His wife opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. No, let me speak. You two built a life around the idea that money means success. But money doesn't make a man, it reveals him. And right now, all I see is a frightened little boy who can't stand the thought of losing control. The silence stretched between us like a crack in glass. Then, without warning, he grabbed the envelope from the table, the same one that had held my husband's letter, and threw it onto the floor. This isn't over, he said through clenched teeth. You'll regret making an enemy out of me. I met his gaze, unflinching. I lost the man I loved. I buried my heart next to his grave. There's nothing left you can take that would hurt me now. For a moment he hesitated, as if realizing there was no victory in this fight. Then he turned sharply, his wife following in silence. The door slammed behind them. I stood there for a long while, my reflection trembling in the glass cabinet, the woman everyone underestimated. The mother they thought too fragile to fight back. But they had no idea what their father had left behind. Not just wealth, but the final move in a game they didn't even know they were playing. And tomorrow, when the truth came out, the world would see it too. The morning after our confrontation, the sky opened up. Rain poured over the estate like a long-delayed cleansing, washing away everything false, everything that had rotted in silence for years. I stood by the window, watching the garden blur behind the downpour. The oak tree swayed gently, as if nodding in quiet approval. That was when the phone rang. It was the lawyer. Mrs. Collins, he said carefully. I thought you should know. Your husband left a video message in the sealed file. He asked that it only be viewed by you and your son, together. For a moment my heart froze. A video message? His final voice. The truth he'd hinted at was finally ready to speak. By noon, my son arrived. Uninvited, of course. His eyes were red, though not from regret. Anger still burned behind them. His wife trailed a few steps behind, clutching her phone as if it might save her. The lawyer placed a small flash drive on the table, then quietly left the room. I plugged it into the screen. The image flickered, and there he was. My husband, alive, smiling faintly, seated in his study, the same shelves behind him that now stood empty. If you're watching this, he began, his voice calm, it means I've finally left this world, and with me, perhaps the illusions that bound this family together. My son swallowed hard. His wife reached for his hand, but he didn't move. To my son, I gave you everything a father could. Opportunity, comfort, the chance to build something of your own. But somewhere along the way, you stopped building and started taking. You took from others, from your mother, from yourself. My son's eyes darted to me, but I stayed silent. And to my wife, the recording continued, you were the reason any of this existed. Every wise decision I made had your hand behind it. Every storm I survived was because you never let go of the wheel when I lost control. You were the foundation of this family. A lump formed in my throat, but I refused to let the tears fall. So, Margaret, I leave you everything. Not out of pity, but out of faith, because I know you'll use it to build, not destroy. As for our son, I've set aside a trust fund for him, but he'll only receive it when he proves he can stand on his own, without hurting those who love him. The screen went dark. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was the rain against the windows, soft and relentless. Finally, my son stood. He can't do that. It's not fair, he stammered, his voice breaking. I turned toward him. Your father wasn't trying to punish you, I said softly. He was trying to save you. But some lessons can't be inherited. They have to be learned. He opened his mouth to speak, but stopped. The fight drained out of him, leaving something far more fragile in its place, guilt. Or maybe grief. He looked smaller suddenly, like the boy who used to fall asleep in my lap after a nightmare. I didn't know, he whispered. I thought you only cared about the money. I smiled sadly. I never cared about the money, darling. I cared about what it cost us. He left soon after, quietly this time. No anger, no slammed doors. Just silence. His wife didn't look back. When the house grew still again, I turned off the screen and sat there for a long time. surrounded by the echoes of a life rebuilt. Outside, the storm had passed. The garden shimmered under the soft light, and beneath the oak tree, the earth looked new again, as though it too had let something go. I walked out, the wet grass cool beneath my feet, and looked up at the sky. For the first time in years, I felt free, not rich, not powerful, just free. My husband's voice lingered in my mind, gentle as ever. Protect the legacy. And I realize now, the legacy wasn't the wealth or the company or the house. It was strength. It was dignity. It was the courage to stand alone and still rise. I smiled through the last of my tears and whispered to the wind, "Rest now, my love." I kept my promise. The rain began again, soft and forgiving. And as it fell, I finally understood. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of mine.